Hi, everybody. This is Andrew Fuge with the Bluefield Arts Festival. I'm joined this morning by Karen Israel, and Karen's piece that's been entered into the festival is called "Born to Ride." So, Karen, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and this particularly lovely piece of artwork?
Sure. Well, my history is that this art is a second career for me, but I've been doing it for 20 years. I was a physical therapist in my prior life, and I'm a full-time professional artist. I work in pastel primarily, although I work in all the mediums here and there, and I teach mostly pastel, mostly locally. Um, my latest creations have been about figures and people, but mostly a lot that have a deeper meaning to me. Like if I see somebody on the street, I use photo reference, obviously. And um, this particular piece was my grandson was riding a bike. I think he's 6. He was probably 5 at the time. And it was the first time, like, no training wheels,
Hmm.
and he was going real fast in a parking lot. And I just snapped the picture. I liked the motion and the fact of his leaning. And I don't know, I just like the shapes, I guess, and the emotionality behind it, which is hard for me to talk about. But my grandson, when he was an infant, had a rare form of leukemia, and he's been in remission. He had a stem cell replacement. He's doing great. He's in first kindergarten, first grade, first
Hmm.
grade.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. And the piece emotionally was, look at him. He's brave. Here he
Hmm.
was, this very ill child, and he's thriving. So the piece had that. But in creating the piece, and I always work from a gray photograph, like black and white. I don't print in color because I want to bring my own color sense on I look at the values of, why I like the structure of the whole composition itself. Like that's really important to me. So I look at the lights, the darks, the midtones, um, and of course the emotionality. First and foremost, I always ask myself, well, what am I trying to say here? And I wanted to say that there's this like brave little boy and he's moving and he's leaning. But I like the shapes of the cars. The problem in creating this, it was interesting, became geez, it looks like he's riding in traffic, even though, he was wearing that helmet. I changed the
Hmm.
color of the helmet. I mean, he wasn't wearing those shorts. I mean, the bicycle wasn't that color. The cars weren't, I changed everything, but I do the whole thing and I look at it and I go, oh my gosh, it looks like he's like riding out in traffic, which like doesn't give a really good message. And then also, how do I create the effect of him in motion and leaning, and the cars are stationary? So I had to redesign some things, and I sharpened edges and tried to blur some edges where he was so that it felt like motion. And hopefully that translates. I also created like a path and a foreground that wasn't there. He was just in a schoolyard parking lot, like riding around like a maniac. So that's, how the piece came to be. My process when I work with pastel, I work on specific types of sanded papers, and many of them take a wet medium. And I love to start out with what we call, pastelists call an underpainting. This time I use Sumi ink, which is a very dark, darker than India ink. I laid those like where the very darkest darks was. I used a brush and laid that in on the paper. And then I also used where there was color. I used something called Art Graph. It's ARTGRAF.
Hmm.
It's a water-based colored graphite. It's really cool. It looks like Teller's chalk. It's like in a kind of a rectangle shape, and you kind of scratch it on the paper and then you wet it with a brush and the color explodes. And so the very background of this piece, like the reddish, is actually just mostly art graph. I didn't put much pastel there. But once everything dries, the Sumi ink and the art graph, I go on top with the actual soft pastel pigment. And of course, I use very high grade pigments when I work. Most of my pastels have a very buttery texture. And some are harder, in texture when you start painting. We call it painting, although people argue that pastel is not painting. But to me, I don't know, if you're filling a surface, you're painting. That's a whole other
Mhm.
argument. But anyhow, so then I go on top. So I let some of the underpainting show through. So where there might be green grass, you might see little bits of orange because that makes the green grass less chromatic, and it makes it more interesting. So that's basically my process. I mean, I'm not formulaic. I don't start every piece the same way. I think it depends on like what I'm trying to say, what the tone of the piece is. If it's a very dark piece, like very tonal towards the dark end of the value scale, I might use a dark piece of paper and not do an underpainting, just put the pastel on directly. If it's a very lit scene or a contrasty scene, I might pick a color, a piece of paper that has a tone, a color to it, and use
Mhm.
that. But especially like in this piece, it was white, sanded paper, just pure white, which is scary when you start on white. I mean, oil painters put down a grisaille or some kind of wash before they're going to actually like put the thick oil paint down. So this is similar with pastel. So
That's
that's
great. Thank you, Karen. I mean, it's a lovely piece,
awesome.
and I think
Thank you.
it really what I liked about it was the energy, and I think it's interesting to hear you talk about how you captured that. So
Oh
thank
yeah,
you for submitting it, and thank you for
you're
participating
welcome.
in the arts festival. And
Great, and thank you for inviting me.